All right. Well, hello, everybody. It's Tuesday again. Can you believe it? And we're here for our weekly live stream inside the Gut Solution Group. So welcome, everyone. And for those of you who join in here, please say hello and let me know you're here and that you can hear me. So we make sure technology is working and you guys don't miss out on what I am going to be talking about today. So I am Mara Salerno. I am a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner for those of you who don't know me. And I am going to be talking about the top 3 triggers that I see in pretty much all of my clients, generally speaking, that are the top triggers for any chronic digestive condition. So whether it's diarrhea, whether it's constipation, whether it's reflux, whether it's SIBO, whether it's gas or bloating, these are typically what I see. Now, remember, I'm saying generally and typically because there are some unique situations sometimes where there's other factors involved, but these are the ones that I see a lot of. And so I'm going to be covering those today and kind of diving into them. And if you have any questions, whether you're here live or you're watching on the replay as you go through the video, just feel free to put your questions in the comments and I will do my best to answer them while I'm here live. And if you put them in on the replay, I'll be sure to come back and answer them as well. Okay. So I'm really happy to have you all here with me today. And a couple of housekeeping notes is I've added in the guide section of the group some links to some important videos and information. And this last week, I actually put out that I created a guide for those of you who are struggling with constipation. And so if any of you maybe missed that and you would like it, then please comment below and say guide. And I will be sure to get you that guide. I'll send you a DM and message you. Okay. And you can take advantage of that. Let's see here. Okay. So the top 3 triggers that I commonly see in my clients when they're coming with their chronic digestive conditions. The first one is food sensitivities. And food sensitivities, I think in some respects has gotten a bad rap, but food sensitivities are basically when not that you're allergic to a food, but that you become sensitive to a food. And the difference between allergies and food sensitivities is that allergies are when you are typically born with them. So you're born with a very strong allergic reaction. And when you consume this food, you have a very strong reaction, which is typically like it could kill you. Okay. It's like where your tongue maybe swells up so much, your throat closes off, you can't breathe, and the like, right? Or you could choke, etc. Or, a minute or 2 minutes or, a very short period of time after you consume this food, you just like break out in hives. That's like an allergic reaction. And that typically is, again, something that you are born with. Now, saying that, you can become so sensitive to a food that you begin experiencing allergic-like responses. Okay, so there is that too. Now, with food sensitivities, what typically happens is that you develop something called leaky gut. And I'm going to do an educational video about leaky gut so that you guys can really understand how the biology basically of the gut works and understand the names and all of that. But basically, when you have a leaky gut, which is your small intestine, the small intestine has these cells that kind of pull together like this when it's nice and healthy and it's working like it should. And when it gets broken down, those single cells, they begin to separate. And when they separate, they look like this. And so inside the small intestine, you'll basically have these windows, right? And those windows are not a good thing. That's because of a damaged gut, a damaged small intestine lining. And when it's damaged, that's when food particles and pathogens, bad bugs, which we're going to talk about next, can float through. And they're not supposed to be able to float through, because the job of your small intestine is to keep anything that shouldn't be getting through from getting through, right? It doesn't allow that. So when you have a food sensitivity, it's typically happening because you have a leaky gut and you eat that food a lot. Like you love broccoli or you love beef. I mean, typically people who I see are eating clean foods. They're usually eating whole foods. Now, there are others who come in and, you know, they're not, but typically my clients eat organic food already and they eat whole foods. But, you know, there's already been damage done and they've got some issues. And so this is what's happening, right? So food sensitivities are a huge trigger because you're eating these foods, you haven't actually rebuilt your gut lining, right? And so these foods come in and they drop through, and when they drop through and they trigger into the bloodstream. And so the immune system is triggered. And when the immune system is triggered, it's triggered because it thinks that there is an invader, right? So it thinks it needs to start fighting this food, and it's a food, like your immune system shouldn't be fighting it off, but because your gut is damaged and you've got that split in your cells, in your tight junctions, then your immune system doesn't know that, right? It's like, well, what is this? So it begins tagging that food after some time. And then now every time you eat that food, your immune system is triggered and it just wants to battle with it. It wants to kill that food, right? But it can't because it's a food. And so what happens is your immune system is activated. And when your immune system is activated, inflammation occurs, right? So a healthy immune system should function that way, but this is a chronic stress, chronic inflammation response because you're going to be eating that food regularly. Eating is one of the most inflammatory things we do on a regular basis. So that is why food can be one of the #1 triggers for people, because the gut is damaged. You're eating these foods because you need to eat, and you're probably eating things that you typically eat over and over again, repeatedly, and this is what is causing a very strong inflammatory response. So the key is, and this is something I think that's forgotten, is that yes, you want to remove the foods that are irritating you, but you don't want to be staying off of them forever, right? The goal is that you want to remove them for a period of time, and it may be a while for some people, depending on how severe their chronic digestive condition is. But then eventually you want to be putting it back in. You know, you want to be able to eat most of those foods. Now, there are foods that are just not good for you, right? But the goal is to be able to eat again. Like, you don't want to not be eating all these foods for forever. It's not a good thing. It should only be for a period of time so that you can rebuild. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions about that, drop it in the comments, again, whether you're live or in the replay, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. The second trigger is pathogens. So pathogens would be bad bacteria, viruses, parasites, worms, fungus, like candida kind of stuff. I would even put mold in the pathogen category, but typically we can see mold. We can only see mold in its own separate testing. So that's why typically people don't talk about mold when they talk about pathogens, but mold acts like a pathogen. It drives your body crazy. So like I was saying with food sensitivities, when the gut lining is damaged and you've got those windows, then not only can food particles come in, but pathogens come in. And remember, pathogens are part of our world, like they're everywhere, right? And everyone's got them, and in our microbiome. So our microbiome is basically our bacteria that is residing inside of our whole body. And we have a gut microbiome, we have a mouth microbiome, we have a nose microbiome, we have our private parts microbiome, we have our eye microbiome, like there's skin microbiome. So there's particular bacterias that exist and survive in these different areas of our body. And we're still even learning about how amazing they are, but it's a communication highway, these bacteria, and we need them. And so when we have pathogens, that's when we don't have a healthy balance in our microbiome any longer, especially in our gut microbiome, but they can live elsewhere, and they can really wreak havoc. Now, there are certain pathogens that just should not exist in your body, regardless, right? Like, for example, Candida we do have a little bit of it, and we want to have just a little bit of it in a healthy amount in our bodies. But when it gets extreme, that's when we start seeing issues. Now, parasites, on the other hand, should never exist in your body. Okay, you don't want those. Those are no good. Worms are no good, right? So, but pathogens are basically critters. And these critters can create a whole host of symptoms. Now, symptoms are great because, they kind of tell us, like, obviously something is going wrong, something is awry. But relying just on symptoms, doesn't always tell us exactly what you have, because you and your buddy could both be, we could test you, and, like, let's say we know you both have Candida and all of that, but your symptoms are totally different. Like, one of you can't sleep at night, the other one is having really itchy skin, or one of you has got constipation and the other one's got diarrhea. So, your symptoms don't always tell us everything. And so we have to dig and investigate. So pathogens are the second trigger. So number one is food sensitivities, and second is pathogens, right? And these pathogens I see in 99.999% of my clients. And if they don't come up on a lab test, we typically have to mop up anyway, because everyone's got them, everyone's walking around with them, and everyone needs to learn how to clean up these pathogens on their own regularly. And that's one of the things that I teach my clients is empowerment education, so that not only do I help you move through whatever you're going through now, but this is like a tool for you for the future, because you're going to have to keep it up if you want to exist as a human being on this planet. It's just the way it is. All right, the third trigger is your stress levels and your nervous system issues. So whenever I ask people this question, like, what was it that tipped you over the edge? Can you remember when you recall and you look back? Is there anything that really happened that brought you to the place where you're so ill now that you want to do something about it, and it's been going on for too long? And, I'll say, did anything stressful happen in your life, et cetera. And for some people, they'll be able to recall when, they were exposed to a lake with giardia or something. Some of you may have heard Jane's story in the interview we did a few weeks ago. But for most people, they'll be like, my dad died and I was in school and I just wasn't taking care of myself, or I just had, my kid and I wasn't sleeping, like, these are all stressful events. And even if you are the most relaxed person and you are having all this joy going on, if you have a lot of things happening in your life, even if they're all happy things, and then your body's breaking down at the same time, you can remember at the same time good things were happening in your life, but you weren't feeling all that great. Your body does not differentiate between good stress and bad stress. It just sees stress. Isn't that crazy? It's kind of sucky. It is kind of sucky, but that's how the body recognizes it. So cortisol functions that way. It doesn't go, good cortisol, bad cortisol. It just says all cortisol, and cortisol is your stress hormone. So you have to be aware that when you're ill and you're not feeling great, you've got to learn how to organize your energy, tame your energy, take care of your energy, because that cortisol, that stress hormone, remember, it doesn't recognize good or bad. If you're doing too many good things and you're on the go, that can really prevent you from being able to recover your chronic digestive condition. So you might see a few things get better, but you're like, God, why are things not getting better? Because you need to slow down. Okay. Now, part and parcel to that is a lot of people who have been struggling with chronic digestive conditions, stress can be their trigger because they are not looking at nervous system issues. So if you've been struggling with a chronic digestive condition for a long time, your nervous system and your brain are programmed now and wired to chronic stress. Doesn't know how to respond in any other way, and you're stuck in that state, and it sucks. And so the only way, no matter how many supplements you take, no matter how many tests you do, none of it is going to change until you do really good nervous system work and rewire and retrain the brain so that the efforts that you make thereof actually make a difference, and make things happen for you. Otherwise, because you've already been doing the supplements, I see this a lot with people. They're like, whether they're, they've already run like 20 bazillion tests. They've got like supplements up the yin yang in their house. And this might be you, for those of you who are watching either live or replay, you can comment and let me know, does that sound like you? You've run all these tests, you've got all these supplements, and it's like, maybe you've even gotten good health coaching, but nothing's changing. And it's because of that. Okay. So those are the three main triggers: food sensitivities, pathogens, and stress or nervous system issues that have not been properly addressed. So for those of you who are watching, I would love it if you would comment, and those of you in the replay, comment and let me know what chronic digestive condition you are struggling with, how long you've been struggling with it, and maybe any wins that you're having. So any wins, like, is there anything that you're discovering, anything that's getting better for you? Go ahead and comment for me. Okay, now the second part that I wanted to cover is how to identify some of these factors, some of these triggers. So stress and nervous system issues are a little more difficult to identify, other than me listening to you telling me your story, or you knowing that you're stressed, and you knowing like, gosh, I've tried this stuff for so long. Yeah, maybe Maral's right. Like, maybe stress, like I'm just stuck in the state, even though my life is pretty good other than what's going on with my health, like, So that is one thing, but the food sensitivities and the pathogens are things that we can test for. And I mean, I can hear them when I hear your stories, but for food sensitivities, some of the things that I like to do is run a food sensitivities panel that both covers IgG and IgA. So if you missed last week's live stream, I actually went through 2 food sensitivities tests, both the Gut Zoomer and from Vibrant Wellness, as well as, I'm sorry, not the Gut Zoomer, the Vibrant America Food Sensitivities Complete Panel, that's both IgG and IgA. And then I went over 2 gut stool tests, which was the GI map and the Gut Zoomer. There we go. And so you can check out that video in there if you want to see the details of the tests and what they look like. But my favorite really is a Vibrant Wellness test, because it covers both the IgG and the IgA test, antibodies. And so it goes through like 208 different foods and ingredients, and they're mainly whole foods. So they're not really processed foods, and really go through in great detail. So I love that test. But food sensitivities tests don't always cover everything, in the sense that, like, you know, I have to hear your story. So if you're somebody who is already only eating like a handful of foods or 2 handfuls of food, a food sensitivities test isn't really going to tell us a whole lot. It's probably just going to give us like a ton of foods that you're already sensitive to, that maybe some of those foods it says you're okay with, but you're not, because your gut lining is so damaged and your body is so sensitive. So these are in extreme circumstances that I'm talking about. And in those cases, we have to consider other dietary options other than what you're doing. So that's for food sensitivities. And for pathogens, we look at the GI map and the gut zoomer. I prefer the GI map right now because the gut just hasn't been detecting things the way that I like, and I try to keep my finger on the pulse. And so again, you can look back at last week's video and find out all those details. But that really gives us a great look. It detects the DNA of pathogens themselves. And so we can see like what bugs you've got going on in there. And remember, no lab test is perfect. I always say that as an umbrella term because it's true. But there are better lab tests, and these are definitely them. Okay, so lastly, I want to cover where to begin, whether you've been on this gut healing journey for a long time or you're new to it. Okay, so number one is, if you've been on this really long term and you're not seeing results, and it's been a few years, you definitely, you need to work with somebody like myself and really work on your nervous system and brain retraining, and then get yourself some help to really get the right lab tests, uncover what's going on, and get some protocols that work. But you've got to address the stress issue first. For those of you who are new, you got to work with somebody like me to get the right testing and to begin investigating what's happening with you, so you don't have to be spinning your wheel for years. This is something that I did, and this is something that I see other people do that come to work with me eventually, is that they're spinning their wheels. People try to DIY things themselves, and to a certain extent, I think that's wonderful. I'm all about people taking their health into their own hands and educating themselves, but there's a ton of information out there on the internet. And one of the things that I see happening is people may actually be finding some of the right pieces to their puzzle on their own, but the problem is that you're not reared and geared and educated to know how to work everything in a beautiful and graceful way at the same time, to reduce as much inflammatory factors as possible, to give the body a big enough break to rest, and then actually rebuild and heal. So a lot of times people will find one thing and it might work for a tiny little bit, like they'll just be working on their food, but that's not enough. You've got to work on all the pieces, the pathogens, the brain work, you got to work on all of these things. And so getting help is really important. So if what I'm saying to you is really resonating and it's really hitting you deep inside your gut and inside your heart, and you're ready to really overcome your chronic digestive condition, then type mentorship down in the comments and I'll send you a DM message and we can chat about what that looks like. Okay. So I think we've covered everything for today. I hope this was helpful for you guys. I'm happy to do any live streams on any topics that you guys want. I always have a lot of ideas from my experience with working with clients that I have, and my own experience with my own chronic digestive condition. But feel free and let me know. Utilize this group as a resource for yourself. Post your questions, talk to one another, share your stories, and I'll be happy to do my best to answer them the best that I can. And I'm sure other people can chime in with their experiences and opinions as well. So I hope you're getting value out of this group. I'm sending you guys all a lot of love and a lot of motivation in your healing journey. And I'll see you guys again next week on the live stream, Tuesday at 11 a.m. And I believe next week, I'm going to be having an interview with one of my previous clients regarding acid reflux, her acid reflux journey with me and how she overcame it. So that'll be really great. And I think that's it. All right, y'all. Have a beautiful rest of your week. Ciao.